to understand how the trivium fits in with the law of cause and effect and getting to the underlying causality, the causal factors, the nature of the problem, so that we can reverse it from there. What we have to understand is essentially what the trivium is. The trivium is a pathway to truth. It is the methodology for knowing how to learn or know anything, how to determine the veracity of information, how to weed through falsehoods and eliminate those impurities so we don't take them in as mental food. That's essentially what the trivium is. Then based on that accurate information, we can come to understand meaning in things. We could answer the question, why? And then in answering that question, why, we become empowered to act, to actually create true, positive, and lasting change in our lives. This is the way that we can improve ourselves. And ultimately, it has to do with the improvement of the mind. The trivium is intricately and inextricably interwoven with the human psyche and our ability to improve the quality of our mental, psychological, and spiritual well-being. So let's first, of course, look at the word, okay? Because everything starts with that vibratory energy of the word. Why is this the word for this methodology? And there's a very deep reason it's named what it is called, trivium. Trivium comes from the Latin language. And before we do this, let's just talk about the origin of the trivium. Okay? People will trace its origin back to medieval times. They'll trace it back further to ancient Rome, even further to ancient Greece. Some people will go so far as to trace it back to ancient Egypt. The trivium comes out of some of the most ancient mystery school traditions in human antiquity. I would say it predates ancient Egypt. In small pockets, humanity has known and used this technique, this methodology, for discovering truth about anything since time immemorial. So I would say its origin is actually lost to antiquity. We don't know how old the trivium method actually is, although some people will claim it's from different periods in human history, and that's fine. I would be of the opinion that it is actually much older than anything that anyone has stated on record, and it goes right back to the dawn of civilization on this planet. So, the word trivium, we're looking at slide number 4 on the What on Earth is Happening radio show page now. The word trivium comes from the Latin language. Okay, its English equivalency is derived from Latin. The Latin word tres or tria, okay, means 3, the number 3. Okay, and you could see that root in so many different things. Trinary, the word 3 itself is derived from tres, tria, okay? And then the second part of trivium is via, okay, via, vi in Latin. Via in Latin means a way, a path, or a road. Okay, so we also use the term way to describe a method. That's the way to do something. Okay, it also means you start at one location and then you travel to a destination. That's what a path is for. It connects two places. So what we want to connect is where we're at now in the human condition, and we want to actually travel to the truth. We want to get to the underlying causes, the true underlying causes of our current condition, so that we can become empowered to change it. So what trivium really means is the three paths, the three roads, or the three ways. You could look at it as the three methods. Okay? I've named it here the threefold path to the truth. On this image, the threefold path to truth. As we've seen, 3 is a sacred number in just about every ancient mystical tradition. Thought, emotion, and action, as we saw, is the real Trinity within us. In many ancient religions, up into the modern day, we see this thread throughout time of a Trinity representing something deeper. You know, whether it's called the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, whether it's the sun, the moon, and the stars and planets, or whether it's thought, emotion, and action. This concept of threefold. We have 3 brains: the reptile, the mammal, and the human, the triune brain, which we've talked about so much. The concept of the 3 in 1, okay? The one overarching methodology that is capable of helping us to learn how to know anything, to weed through falsehoods, to come to truth. It's ultimately 3 methods which all bring us to the same place at the center, which represents the truth. Okay? So, the trivium itself is actually part of a larger threefold method or a threefold path. And I put that on image number 5, slide number 5. The trivium works in conjunction with something known as the quadrivium. The quadrivium, which means 4 methods or 4 paths, 4 roads, okay? These ultimately form the sacred number 7, as you could see readily. 3 plus 4 is 7. Another sacred number. 7 gods of the ancient world, the 7 chakras, okay? The 7 steps on the ladder to God, the tree of life. Levels on that path, on that symbol. So the quadrivium, or the fourfold path, is the quantification methods that are used in conjunction with the trivium. These are the sciences of measurement. Numbers play a huge role in the quadrivium. And we'll be talking more about the quadrivium next week. That'll be the topic for discussion next week. We'll look into the quadrivium. Okay? We're also going to have some guests coming up that are going to talk about the trivium and quadrivium. And I'll be mentioning that probably next week on the show. Awaiting confirmation. So, the trivium and the quadrivium work in conjunction. They both work in conjunction with our 5 senses. Okay? The 5 senses are the bridge between these 2 sciences, these 2 methodologies, ancient methodologies. These are the 2 methods that help our 5 senses come into harmony with truth. That's what needs to be understood. We are using these as methodologies to bring our awareness through our senses, to bring our awareness into harmony with truth. So perception is not reality. It can waver widely off from what reality actually is, from what the truth is. The truth is just that which is. And again, this brings us to the point where I have to talk about the concept of what I mean by the word truth. And people argue constantly about this. You have this solipsistic thread that people are still hooked on solipsism. And I said from day one, this show would not be for everyone, and many people will reject it out of hand from just show 1. It would not even go any further than that. And there are people to this day who still email me and talk about the concepts I brought up in early shows about solipsism and are in complete disagreement. Oh, there is no actual such thing as truth. We can't actually know what the truth is. Well, that's where you set foot off the journey from the very beginning. You were never on the path. And the idea that people don't believe that there is any such thing as actual truth, that we cannot come to know what truth is. And nobody is talking about here knowing the totality of the mind of God. That's not what I'm talking about when I use the word truth. I'm talking about events which have actually occurred. Learning about what is taking place, which is why I called the show What on Earth is Happening. To know about what is happening, what is taking place in our reality, in the realm in which we exist and operate. You want to get into other dimensions of existence and, New Age ideas like that, fine. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm not talking about knowing the totality of every dimension and every timeline and every planet that exists in the universe. I'm talking about the here and now. Being here and being in the present moment and knowing what's going on around you. That truth. And it's knowable. It is knowable through the study of the past. It is knowable through taking in information and properly gathering and processing and using it. That is possible. So if you're a solipsist, this show was not for you on day one, and certainly at this point will not be for you. That is something that I call the biggest lie, and if people buy into that one, they'll buy into any lie. That's what the dark force wants people thinking at all times. I talked about it as to Satanists, it is the biggest sin, because they want to propagate solipsism to everybody but them. So therefore, they can get everyone else to believe that there is no truth, but they know what the truth is. See, to them, for them, solipsism is a sin. That's something that a dark occultist should not engage in, should frown upon. But it is something that he should attempt to sell to the dead, as they call people who believe in this concept of solipsism, this ideology. Once again, we're talking about perception as not being reality, but it could come into harmony with reality. We're not perceiving at all times what the actual reality is. We have filters on, that veil us from an accurate perception of reality. The idea of the Trivium is to it's a methodology for removing those filters to be able to see the truth as it actually is, readily accept it, and then do something about it. Do something with it. Get involved. Step into the slipstream of active co-creation. So, when we look at what the Trivium is, and we take a look at how it has, I guess you could say, evolved, or how it has been interpreted through time, there are three general interpretations or overall ways of looking at what the Trivium is. And I've called these in slide number 6, the classical interpretation, the esoteric interpretation, and the modern interpretation of the Trivium methodology. Because again, this information on how to acquire knowledge, understand it, and then do something with it has been with us, again, since time immemorial. So there have been different ways of looking at this system. The classical method is probably the one that most people are most familiar with in the words that are used to describe this threefold process or method. And again, the order of the steps are all important. They matter. That's why I put numbers here on this chart. You can't take them out of order. You take them out of order, you destroy the entire methodology. And it will not work for you or anyone else. And that's why some dark occultists have attempted to reverse this process, to take some of them out of order and interchange them, and that you can't do that. Okay, that's like, trying to eat your sandwich before you make it. You have to make the sandwich first, then you could eat it. Okay? So the first step in the classical interpretation of the trivium is known as grammar, and we'll get to what these represent in a moment. The second step is logic, and the third is rhetoric. So in the classical interpretation, you will hear the trivium referred to as grammar, logic, and rhetoric in that order. Okay? In the esoteric interpretation, which is the one I generally, I don't even want to use the word use. I mean, you're using the same method regardless of how you look at it. I look at the trivium as this form, as knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Knowledge corresponding to the first step, or grammar in the classical tradition. Understanding corresponding to logic, or the second step, the intermediary step. And then wisdom corresponding to rhetoric, the third and final step. There is also a modern interpretation of the trivium method, and this is the one I'm probably going to spend the most time explaining, because you can use a very accurate metaphor for it in real world terms that people will readily understand. We're going to look a little bit into the esoteric modality, I guess you could call it, but I'm going to focus on explaining the trivium today through the modern interpretation. And this is input, processing, and output. Input corresponding to grammar or knowledge, processing corresponding to step 2 or logic and understanding, okay? And output is the third and final step, corresponding to rhetoric, or what has been called wisdom in the esoteric sense. And this, as you will see, all has to do with information. The input of information, the processing of information, and then the subsequent output of information in that order. So these are the three ways that the trivium could be looked at.